At the age of just 4 years old, children in North Korea bow before giant portraits depicting the three supreme leaders of the Kim dynasty, a ritualistic display of obedience that embodies Kim Jong-un's strategy to maintain his unquestioned grip on power, a former North Korean diplomat told U.S. lawmakers on Wednesday. Kim Jong-un, his father Kim Jong-il and grandfather Kim Il-sung have carefully cultivated the perception that they are divine rulers and consolidated power by sheltering the North Korean population from the outside world and manipulating the country's welfare system. Until now, the North Korean system has prevailed through an effective and credible reign of terror and by almost perfectly preventing the free flow of outside information, according to Tae Yong-ho, a former high-ranking North Korean official who defected to South Korea. Tae was number 2 in the North Korean embassy in London before he escaped with his wife and 2 sons, arriving in South Korea in 2016. As long as Kim Jong-un is in power, there will be no chance for the world to improve the human rights issue or to cancel the nuclear program, he told in January. But while Kim has leaned on decades of brainwashing tactics to elevate himself as a god, a growing curiosity about foreign culture and the increasing penetration of free market capitalism have begun to pose an internal threat to his domestic system of control in recent years, Tae told lawmakers on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. There are great and unexpected changes taking place within North Korea. Contrary to the official policy and wish of the regime, the free markets are flourishing. The citizens do not care about state propaganda but increasingly watch illegally imported South Korean movies and dramas, he said. Kim has tried to quell the demand for outside information by opening his father's archive of foreign films, most of which were produced in the former Soviet Union or other socialist nations, Tae said. But the North Korean government has also made select Western media content available, including movies like The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast and the cartoon Tom and Jerry, he said, a sign that the ever-building flow of unsanctioned information into the Hermit Kingdom is a concern. And that concern is rooted in the fact that Kim has not experienced the same detached and sheltered lifestyle of those he rules over, a reality that if internalized by the general population could ultimately jeopardize his standing as a deity, Tae added. Regime survival. While the U.S. has tried to ramp up diplomatic and economic pressure on the North Korean leadership through additional sanctions and tough rhetoric, those efforts have done little to slow Kim's march toward developing a reliable nuclear-tipped long-range ballistic missile. And while China and Russia have both recently supported additional United Nations sanctions on North Korea, their willingness to use their influence over the regime to increase pressure remains in doubt. 2 senior administration officials insisted Tuesday that the Trump administration is still engaged in ramping up pressure on the North Korean government through diplomacy, despite Trump's tweet earlier this month that his Secretary of State was wasting his time trying to negotiate with Kim. Defense Secretary James Mattis said on Saturday that Washington does not accept a nuclear North Korea and said any use of nuclear weapons by the North will be met with a massive military response, effective and overwhelming. Kim has made it clear that he is willing to develop a long-range nuclear weapon at any cost, and he views achieving that capability as the key to ensuring regime survival. North Korean military officers have been trained to unleash a massive artillery strike on the South Korean capital of Seoul without hesitation at the first signs of an attack by the U.S., Tae said, noting that a retaliatory strike would result in massive casualties. By attaining a nuclear-capable intercontinental nuclear weapon, Kim hopes to blackmail the U.S. into reducing its military presence on the Korean peninsula. If U.S. forces were to leave the peninsula, Kim believes foreign investment would soon follow, prompting the ruling class in South Korea to flee, which would neutralize the primary threat to his own regime, Tae said. With a nuclear capability, North Korea would also force Washington to examine the extent of its military commitment to South Korea, particularly if the scenario forces the U.S. to weigh potentially sacrificing an American city in return for protecting the entire South Korean territory, he added. Today, Kim Jong-un thinks that only nuclear weapons and ICBMs can help him avert the continuing disintegration of the North Korean system, Tae told U.S. lawmakers on Wednesday. He also thinks that the existence of a prosperous and democratic South Korea so close to the border is, by itself, a major threat towards his dynasty. While Kim Jong-un has already long had the tools to destroy South Korea effectively, he also believes it is necessary to drive American forces out of the peninsula, he said. Targeted information campaign. The U.S. could touch the Achilles heel of Kim Jong-un by tapping into the societal shift within the North Korean population with a targeted information campaign that disseminates basic concepts of freedom and human rights, according to Tae. While some North Koreans have developed an appetite for South Korean-produced entertainment, Tae said that the majority of content being consumed does not resonate past the point of sparking curiosity. But by strategically producing and distributing tailor-made content that challenges the North Korean population to critically analyze their own living conditions, the U.S. could counter the Kim regime's brainwashing operation over the long term, a move that could foster domestic dissatisfaction that may eventually help drive Kim toward a willingness to compromise, he said. These changes, however, make it increasingly possible to think about civilian uprising in North Korea, Tae told U.S. lawmakers. As more and more people gradually become informed about the reality of their living conditions, the North Korean government will either have to change and adapt in positive ways for its citizens, or to face the consequences of their escalating dissatisfaction. In the short term, however, neither the Trump administration nor Pyongyang have indicated they are serious about coming to the negotiating table, and North Korea is rapidly developing the capability to not only attack South Korea but also threaten the continental U.S. with a nuclear strike. In the face of that emerging situation, Tae said he supports building on the momentum that has been achieved through additional diplomatic and economic pressure on the North Korean leadership in addition to strengthening cooperation with South Korea and the global community. Tae also recommended that the U.S. expand its use of soft power in an effort to ultimately convince Kim that his nuclear goal is unattainable but also offer a path forward that does not result in a massive loss of life. By reaffirming its commitment to using military force but also presenting a clear alternative that would guarantee regime survival and alleviate some of the pressure that has crippled the North Korean economy, the U.S. may be able to start a dialogue over denuclearization using Kim's emerging domestic issues as leverage, he said. Before any military action is taken, I think it is necessary to meet Kim Jong-un at least once to understand his thinking and to try to convince him that he would be destroyed if he continues his current direction, Tae said. While there is no guarantee that Kim will ever be willing to abandon his nuclear ambitions, nor that domestic pressure within North Korea will pose a credible threat to the ultimate survival of his regime, Tae argues that the U.S. should invest in every strategic possibility before using military force. We cannot change the policy of terror of the Kim Jong-un regime. But we can educate the North Korean population to stand up by disseminating outside information, he said.